Heidi here from Rain Country Homestead, and I'm going to show you how you can make an apron in a couple of hours. Now, you may see me end up with a different attire because even though I can do this in a couple hours straight, I don't have a couple hours straight to work on this today. So I'm going to start on it today and then probably finish it in the next couple of days depending on how many different things I got going on. So my plan is to make the body for the apron out of the floral fabric here. And then I'm going to use the plaid for the ruffle, the pocket, the ties, and all that kind of stuff. Now, since I'm starting with the fitted sheet, because I want to save the flat sheet out of the set for doing, if I make a skirt or something out of it and need the longer strips. So what you want to do is you want to just get your corners and, so you can get this to lay flat. Okay, this obviously isn't going to work right. So what I'm going to do is I've got this folded in half because I want to cut two out, and now I'm going to fold it over again. I'm using this apron because it's one of those that I made a little too long for myself as my guideline, and this person is about 7 inches taller than me. And so I want to make sure that it's going to be long enough. So I'm going to base it off of this, and then I'm going to add a little bit more up here. And so as you see, I'm folding this apron in half. And what I did for the first apron pattern I made up was I had a store-bought apron. For the most part, I liked the shape of, but it still just wasn't quite full enough or long enough to suit my needs and just what I like. And so I laid that apron out on some fabric just to give me a guideline of where I wanted the top in proportion to where the ties were, and then the length, and then the fullness. And then I simply drew some lines around, adding that fullness that I knew I wanted. I've got this ruffle here. This can be a little confusing. Probably the best idea, besides folding this in and making sure it's as flat as possible, will be for me to draw some lines. But I usually do pretty good just cutting. And then you want to make sure, I've already got some of the seam allowance here. I'm going to leave a little bit extra. So I've got this all folded in half. I'm cutting out two apron bodices at the same time. I just go with the flow, and I know how this is kind of folding up, so I'm allowing for that. Leaving a little extra for folding over and hemming. This corner I'm going to know that's where that tie is going to go. I'm leaving just a little bit here for the seam, so I just roll it over real small a couple of times. Put a little point there that tells me that's where the tie is going to go. Keep it moving up. I'll probably make it just a tad bit fuller. And then I'm going to go up and I'm going to add a little bit more for body length. And then obviously for the one I make for myself, I'm going to hopefully remember to cut it shorter. I'll check and see if it's working straight. It is, thankfully, wonderfully. And I'm just going to go ahead and rip it all the way down because I'm going to need a total of 4 ties. That looks like a good length for a tie, and you can put it on and, after you get it put together, and you don't hem your ends until you realize, oh, this is a little too long, so you can just cut it and then, till you figure it out. But this is a good length right here to start with, and you can tell that's probably about 4 feet. And I'll do the same for the ties around the neck. Now, for the ruffle, it's the same thing. I'm going to snip that there on that line. And then however big you want your ruffle is going to depend on you. And I don't remember how much. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have one more strip. And then I'm going to do a pocket. So I'll use this as an example. I'll do a pocket here, and then what I like to do on mine is I'll have the big, it'll be a big pocket, and then on one side for mine And I'm going to go ahead and do this for her because I'm pretty sure she'll like that. I just put a stitch down to have another smaller pocket, and that's where I'll keep my pocket knife and a small pair of scissors. So now we're on to part 2 of the apron making, and as I suspected, I did not have time to come back to it yesterday after cutting it out. As short as that was, but seriously, my days have been super duper full. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do on the apron is I'm going to take the body. Obviously, I cut out 2 pieces here, and I'm going to start putting the ruffle on. And please forgive how dirty, how stained my hands are. They're more stained than usual because I made a trade with someone. They traded me some fresh caught halibut, cod, and deer meat for restoring a couple of very rusty cast iron kettles that they found. This is a bit of a slower process. I just do it all by hand, and I've made a zillion skirts, because not just skirts for me, but when I was making costumes for my dance shows, this was something I ended up having to do quite a bit. So anyway, I just fold the material as I go. I sew a little bit, fold it different ways each time, because it will look better if you do that. Fold it like that, do a little stitch, then you fold it like this. And I never know exactly how much fabric I'm going to need for a ruffle, so I'd rather, some people you can measure it out, but since I'm doing this by hand and it can vary exactly how much fabric you end up with at the end, then I just like to make sure I have what I know is well more than enough in my strips, and then I just start sewing, and then if I have to add on, I add on. And then when I get to the end, if there's extra material, then I just cut it off. The next step that you want to do is you want to make sure you get your ties made. So I want to set this piece aside. You can do this a couple of different ways. You can either just go ahead before you cut these to the length you want. You can just go ahead and fold it as one long strip and then stitch it down, which is what I'm going to go ahead and do this time. And so you're just going to do a straight stitch all the way down, making sure you lock your stitches at the end. Stop and check and make sure it's folded over evenly. And so then the next thing you want to do is you want to turn them. And what I found is that using a long pair of straight forceps like this, we keep several of these on hand because they're just these things. You can get a set of them. The curved ones are nice too. You can get a full set of them on Amazon for a pretty good price. Just make sure you find stainless steel, and they're very useful for all kinds of things. But I find this works really good for turning. So I'm going to make this one the neck, the one that goes around the neck, so I can show you about where you want to cut it. If you're gonna have it go tied directly behind your neck, just cut it in half. And then after you get the apron put together, you can decide by tying it and stuff just how long these need to be and cut them and then hem them accordingly. But since she wants hers tied on the side as I do mine, I usually do approximately a foot or so difference in length. So I'll fold it like that, so I'll have extra. Yeah, go just a little bit longer. And then I'll go to where the fold mark is, and then I'll cut it. And then I'm going to want to hem at least the one edge, and this will be the edge that I sew onto the apron. And I like to do this first before I hem all around the apron, because I'll sew this on as I'm hemming. I do go over it a couple of times to be sure that it's going to hold well, since that's where those are going to be stress points wherever the ties are. So you want to make sure that you sew it on there real good. So I'll just hem that down, fold it over and hem it down. I'm getting ready to turn the ties that will go to the waist. So this time I'm going to cut this in half. This is actually quite a bit, but I want to wait till I get it all together before I decide for sure how long I'm going to make the ties. I like to have plenty of length just to be sure. And then I just tie a big bow. What I've decided to do, and I was accidentally not recording when I thought I was, is to the top of the apron and to the top of the pocket, just to add a little more color and a little more interest, is I'm putting this as a border piece at the top. That'll kind of help the flowers pop a little bit more too. This particular step, you will definitely need to pin it in place because it's going to be tricky getting it lined up. You want your pieces lined up perfectly. So when you go to stitch this down, you're going to use a straight stitch. Well, you could use a zigzag, but when you go to stitch this down, well, zigzag would actually be kind of cute. Maybe I'll do that anyway. But either way, you're still going to want this to line up to make sure that your stitching catches it on both sides. So you got to look carefully, and then you're definitely going to want to pin it to hold it in place. And I am going to go ahead and use a zigzag stitch because I will be doing a zigzag stitch all the way around the apron anyway, so it just makes sense to do it that way. So I'll do one up here too. Though I won't need to hem this part now, but I do need to sew the ties on there, so I'm going to go ahead and do a zigzag stitch all the way across and so it matches the whole way around. Okay, so I got my zigzag stitch set. I've got it pinned in place. Pop the stitch down. It's one of those few times I actually use pins. I hate using pins and try to avoid them if I can. But there are times you really need to use your pins. Now, what you need to do is, since this particular apron it's going to have the side tie, I'm going to start with the very top of the apron first to make sure that I get the appropriate ties put on here. I always tie my apron on the left. You may want to tie it on the other side. If you're going to tie it on the left, you're going to put the longer piece on the right. I'm just going to stitch that down there right on the corner. We'll leave, actually, I need to fold this over first, because that's part of the hem there. And then I like to bring this down a ways so that just has a little more stability, because again, your ties are your stress points, so you want to make sure they're on there real good. So you're going to lock it down. I usually go over it a couple of times. And I'm going to stitch all the way across, more for just the looks than anything. And then I'm going to put this on the opposite corner, folding this over since that's part of the hem, overlapping it good, because then I'll be stitching down that way as well. And then when I come back the other side, I'll be stitching up over that other piece. Gotta double it, actually triple it. And then sew, make sure it stays along that edge as you're sewing. I laid this on here wrong, so I'm going to have to turn it over. What I was thinking, because technically you're supposed to go the other way, so you got to have it so it's facing this way so you can watch your fold. Now with this kind of fabric, you can roll it so it's doubled over. For the top, I just do a single just because of there's already so many layers of fabric right there with the tie and everything else. And that part's covered up anyway. And again, I like to make sure that ties on there real good. And then from this point on, you can roll it tight and have a nice, so you don't have any edges sticking out, which is typically what I'll do for this. And what I do is I just lay it right so that the corner is centered on that. And just like with the top, this particular flannel's actually pretty thick. You want to make sure you stitch over that a few times because this is going to be a stress point. It may not look super pretty stitch-wise, but if you want it to hold, you want to make sure it's on there good. So you may prefer to use a straight stitch for that rather than the zigzag. I just tend to like the zigzag for this kind of stuff. Well, the apron is all put together. I've got the top, I've got all the ties, I got the hemming all done. All right, so the first thing I'm going to want to do is I did trim this down some, but I'm going to trim it down just a little bit more. I do understand I still have to fold over the edges, so I don't want to trim it down too much. I like a nice big pocket because if you're out in the garden and you go, oh gee, there's some tomatoes, I better pick them, and then you keep picking and picking, it's nice to have a big pocket to toss them into. So I'm just kind of looking at this right now, just sort of eyeballing it. I'm not going to pin it on here yet because the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put this piece on there first, and I'm going to do it similar to what I did up there, is I'm going to overlap it so it's on both sides. That's already folded in, and this back side should be okay because I'm going to go ahead and use a zigzag stitch across to stitch this on here, and I did intentionally leave some extra length. So you may or may not want to pin this in place to make sure it doesn't slide. I want to double check and make sure that this is going all the way to the top. What I found, it is nice that you have a pretty thick top to your pocket. It holds its shape a little bit better. Okay, so back to here. The next thing I want to do, now that I've got that on there, is I want to get this laid out the way I want it. And what you want to make sure you do is get this as close to the bottom as you can, so that these corners will almost be touching the edge of that rounded part there. All right, and then check your distances. This is off. And that looks pretty straight. And then you're going to fold this under. And I'll put just a couple pins down here to start with. And again, this is when it comes to the aprons, I do quite a bit of pinning because it's really important to get that pocket straight. If you don't have it pinned, it's going to shift on you when you try to sew it. So you do need to pin it, but this actually makes it much easier. This is one of the things that when you pin it, you're glad you did because it made the job go easier. All right, something I realized I forgot was that I wanted to put the zigzag stitch at the top of the pocket, so I took these pins out up here and moved them down here, just get them out of my way, because you're not going to be able to do that stitch across there if you decide to do that. I just think it'll be a good idea because it'll match the whole trim of the apron, plus it'll hold that fabric together up here so it doesn't separate, you know, and get kind of funky. I'm going to throw up that zigzag stitch right across the top. Lock that down, especially at the top, because that's another stress point. And the hands are going in and out of the pocket, and the things are going in and out of the pocket. But yeah, that ends up being a stress point. I sometimes didn't lock the stitches down at the top and had to come back and redo it. And then I also do it at the corners, at each corner, every time I turn it. That's probably unnecessary, but I always just feel better about it to do that. So across the bottom. I'm not trying to sew super fast because I need to double check and make sure I don't have anything in the way, make sure this is staying square and it didn't shift on me even with the pins in it. I also like to put another small pocket off to the side, and this is for a pocket knife or a pair of scissors. And what I'll do In fact, I need to ask her if she's left or right-handed because she may want it on that side. So I'm not actually going to sew the stitch down right now. But all I do is I'll line this up where I want it. For me, it's always, I'll make this about this wide, which is about 2 inches, 2.5 inches. And then I'm going to sew it up to about this point and then lock it down because this is a pretty deep pocket. If you sew it all the way up and you just have a short pocket knife, it's going to be hard to get in there to it for the width that it is. All I did was just cut out a couple of squares of fabric of the two contrasting or, you know, other prints and made sure they're about the same size. And I just laid one over the top of the other and then pinned them into place. Again, this is something you'll want pinned. Now, how much of a zigzag, how tight you want it is going to be up to you. I usually set this on about, well, for this machine, it's number 3 or number 2. It goes from 0 to 4. 0 is really where you want it if you want it to be what they call a satin stitch. But because of the way I like this to look, I usually do somewhere between 3 and 2. And I'll start from the outside corner and then make sure none of your drawstrings are underneath there. Every once in a while I forget to look at that. I would try it on, and actually I did try it on so I can show you what it looks like on, but it's not made to fit my short stature. So it looks a little funny. But you see what it's designed after the aprons you see me wear in all my other videos, and you see how those look on. But you know, it's very full at the bottom and it wraps around clear, almost around to the back. And it's just very comfortable and full and pretty, and it protects the clothes. So there you have it, how to make an apron out of some sheets in just a couple of hours total time. So thanks for watching, take care, God bless.